Hey guys, welcome to Brillianaire, a nonprofit dedicated to providing free education for students. And today we have a series of videos, and this is going to be episode 1 of that series. And these videos are going to be teaching you the basics of Python. So in this episode, we're going to be looking at the basic print function, as well as how to get user input in Python. So as you can see today, I'm using VS Code, and I'm going to be running, of course, Python. And so there's a lot of tutorials on YouTube on how to download VS Code and how to get Python running. So if you don't have that already, go ahead, watch those videos, download the necessary components, and come back when you're ready. So now that you're ready, let's start off with the basic print function. So for Python, all you have to do is just type in print and open parentheses, and you can put whatever values you want in there. And the print function is basically a way for you to display any output. So to start off, let's put in a quotation mark and let's put in the words hello world. And you can close out your quotes, close out your parentheses, and there we go. That's just the basic command line. And if we hit run on this, it should go to my terminal and print the words hello world. So as you can see, this function is used to display any output. And so here we put in the words hello world in quotation marks, and it allowed us to print that out in the terminal. So this thing right here in the print function is called a string, and it's because it's a sequence of characters within quotation marks, and we call that data type a string. Now there's also integers, so we can print those out too. So just any numbers right here with no decimals, we can print those out as well. And as you can see, hello world, and the next line it prints out 1. And we can also do a lot of functions within the print statement. So for example, if we wanted to add two numbers together, we could add 1 plus 1 within the print statement, and it would print out 2, as you can see down here. So this print function is very powerful, and it's also very basic, so it's really easy to display any output that you'd like. And yeah, okay, so now let's talk about some variables. So a variable is basically just a place where you can store some information. So for example, I can call my variable number, and I can set it equal to 1. And now when I print number, as you can see, just using the same basic print function, just putting the word number in the print function, we print out the number 1. Because we stored the number 1 within our variable called number, when we print out number, it outputs the number 1. And so what if we did this? What if we put number within quotation marks? Well, in this case, it would print out the actual word number. That's because in the first example we have here, number is a variable, and we set that variable to equal 1 in the first line. But in this statement, number is actually a string because we put it in between some quotation marks. So when we run the second print statement, it's going to be printing out the actual word number. And so that's kind of how these data types work out in Python. So let's try another example of variables. So let's say I have a variable a, and let's set it equal to 3. Okay, and let's say I have a variable b, and I set it equal to 5. Now, I can print out a, I can print out b, and it's just going to give me 3 and 5 in the terminal. But I could also print out a plus b. And so when I print this out, it's going to give me 8, as you can see right there. So what does that tell us? It tells us that you can store numbers in variables, and you can do operations with the variables themselves to give you your desired results. So for example, instead of just adding 3 and 5, I can just store them in variables and add the variables together to still give me an answer of 8. And so obviously this works with subtraction, multiplication, division, whatever you want to do. So the question is, why would we want to even do this? Like, what's the point of doing a plus b when we can just do 3 plus 5? Well, let's say that you had a program, a really big program, and you had to put in different numbers and run the code each time. And so you don't want to go through each line and keep changing all the numbers. Instead, you can save the numbers in a variable, right? And you can do all your operations with the variable. So let's go back to our example. Let's say I wanted a program to take 2 numbers, and I wanted it to add them. I wanted it to add them, I wanted to subtract them, I wanted to multiply them, and I wanted to divide them. Let's say I had a program that does this. Instead of typing 3 plus 5, 3 minus 5, 3 times 5, 3 divided by 5, and then doing all of that, I can just store them in variables like this. And so what if I wanted to change the numbers, right? If I didn't use variables, then I would have to go through each of these print statements and change each number in those print statements. So for example, let's say we have 3 plus 5, print 3 minus 5, print 3 times 5, and print 3 divided by 5. So in this case, if I wanted to change the numbers, let's say I wanted to do 4 plus 5, 4 minus 5, 4 times 5, then I would have to go through each of these individual print statements and change all the number 3s to number 4s like this, right? And so this may seem easy because we only have 4 commands, but think about if you have a really big program and you have a lot of print statements and operations that you're doing. You don't want to be sitting there going through each and every single command and switching all the numbers. Instead, on the first case on top here, I can just change the variable a to equal 4, and now all of these commands will be 4 plus 5, 4 minus 5, 4 times 5, 4 divided by 5, etc. And so all I had to do was just change one line of code, and that affected all of this. So that's why variables are so important and why they're so powerful to be using in coding. So if I were to run this, you can see it would give me 4 plus 5, 4 minus 5, 4 times 5, 4 divided by 5. And yeah, outputs that in the terminal. So yeah, basically that is the print function, why it's important, and also a little bit about why variables are important in coding. So let's talk about user input, right? So in Python, user input basically is a function called, input. So it's pretty straightforward. But we want to store this input in a variable. So let's call this variable a, just because it's easy to remember. So a equals input, and we're just going to close it like that. So when I run this, as you can see, I can actually type stuff in here. And there we go. Once it does that, those string of characters that I typed in the terminal will be stored in the variable a. And a way we can check that is if we print a, right? Let's run this again, and I'm going to type in my input. So let's just type in some random letters. It's going to print that same sequence of letters back here. So this means our program prompted the user, so us, it told us to type in something because we put an input function. So we inputted a bunch of letters, and it stored that sequence of letters in the variable a. And when we printed a, we got that same sequence of characters back. So we can do a little more than this. We can actually change the input function and put values within the parentheses. So we can actually put strings within here. So we can say, enter a name, colon, space. And close off your quotes, close off your parentheses. Oops, add an extra one there. And if we run this, it's going to prompt me to enter a name. So it's just going to print whatever we put in quotes. And then after that, we can type in our input. So enter a name, I'm going to say Bob. And so when we print a, we print out Bob because we inputted the word Bob and we stored it in the variable a, and we printed a, so it gave us Bob back. Okay, nice. So let's say I wanted to get input as a number instead. Well, I could obviously just say input and just type in a number, but when you type that in, it's going to store that as a string. So you want to type in int parentheses input. Oh, not in out, input. There we go. And you want to close it off. So what this extra int does, basically, it takes the input, so right here, whatever you type in, and it's going to switch it into an integer. So obviously, if you type in something like a string of characters within the input, it's not going to be able to change that to an integer because you haven't given it any numbers. But if you input some numbers, it's going to be able to change those numbers into an integer data type. So instead of a string, you're going to have an integer. So for example, if I typed in the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, it's going to output 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's cool. Now we have integers. And let's say we wanted to add two integers. So let's say we wanted b to equal 5, and I want to add a plus b. So a is our input, whatever the user gives us, and b is 5. So we want to add a plus b. So let's say we give the number 1, 2, 3, 4 again. it's going to print out A plus B. So it's going to print out 1, 2, 3, 4 plus 5. And it's going to give us 1,239. So that's a simple way to ask the user to input whatever they want. And you can do operations with it. You can print it back out. You can do a lot of things with this user input function. So in this example, we took an input from the user. We changed it into the integer data type so we could add numbers. And then we added it to 5. So let's see an example where we don't use this int input function. Let's say we just use input. Let's see what happens in this case. As you can see, we get an error. And this is because we didn't use that int function. So when we don't use the int function and we simply just use input and we type in some numbers, it actually stores those numbers as a string. So instead of storing them as 1, 2, 3, 4 like a number, it stores them as 1, 2, 3, 4 in quotation marks. So we can't add this string to another number because this is technically not a number, it's a string. So it can't be added, subtracted, divided, multiplied. That's why we use the int function. That's why we put int and surround the parentheses in the input function. So we do int, open parentheses, input, and then close all the parentheses. And so this way, it's going to change our string of 1, 2, 3, 4 into an integer 1, 2, 3, 4. And from there, we can add it to other integers and numbers. So see, we can type in any number. It doesn't have to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's just going to add it to 5. So yeah, that was basically a little bit on user input and the different data types and why user input is useful. So yeah, this is a little bit of a shorter episode, but thank you all for watching. This one was about the print statement as well as user input and a little bit on variables and data types. So I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time for the next episode. Thank you guys.